So you're brand new to Virginia Woolf. Where do you start? My Virginia Woolf shelf is here. I'm wearing my Virginia Woolf sweater. I have my A Room of One's Own mug with English breakfast tea. What that means is that it is finally time to make my Virginia Woolf video. For this video, I want to do an overview. You're new to Virginia Woolf, maybe you've read a little bit. Where do I start? She's written numerous novels and then also has quite the collection of shorter works, letters, essays, diary entry, etc. Spoiler, I have not gotten into all of it. I have, however, read all of her major novels. I am so excited that I can say that. That was a big project for me. That's how the Bald Wolf Pack got started. A lovely lady that I am now friends with said, "Hey, I want to read all of Virginia Woolf. Who's with me?" I was in law school. I was in three other book clubs. And I said, yes, absolutely. And it's been one of the best decisions of my life. Before we dive in, I'll give you a little bit of my background and how I was introduced to Virginia Woolf. I was introduced to Virginia Woolf in high school. My 12th grade high school teacher, she taught AP literature, assigned for us to read Mrs. Dalloway. I remember reading that book so clearly. It was winter, even though this book takes place in the summer. And I remember being so confused and sort of just bumbling along in the book. I wish I remembered the exact moment that it clicked for me. I do not, and I was reading a school edition. This was also before I wrote in my books, so I have no idea what I was thinking at the time I was reading that. But about halfway through the novel, it clicked and I said, oh my gosh, this novel is about life, and I felt like I could truly appreciate just what a masterpiece it was. At 17, it was the first book that was truly a favorite book. Before that, I had favorite books, but this was the first, oh my gosh, moment. I'm reading a great piece of literature, and also this piece was maybe written especially for me. It speaks to me in ways that I didn't realize literature could. In college, I was going back and forth between majoring in English. I did end up majoring in English, and it is because of my Virginia Woolf class. I found out about this class. I completely rearranged my schedule so I could take it. I was a sophomore just coming out of the Intro to English class. I went back and looked at the syllabus somewhat recently, actually, and in the syllabus it says, I do not recommend taking this course. It's very difficult if you don't have a couple more English classes under your belt. Took it anyway, great decision. I knew it wouldn't come back up again before I left, so it was really a now or never sort of situation. At that point, Mrs. Dalloway was the only Woolf that I had read, and I think that course, it was also a combination. So it was not only our undergraduate course, which had an undergraduate course number, there were also grad students in our class, and there were a few people auditing the class who were not at the university, coming back to school, retired, various stages of their life, and they came to sit in this course. And that course was so wonderful, did such a good job. Unfortunately, or fortunately for me, we did not have time to read every single Virginia Woolf novel in that course. Unfortunate because I didn't get to read all of her works and study it with my class and my professor, but fortunate because I was very busy that semester and that would have been a lot. So since that class, it had been my goal, and it was especially nice not just to go back and read the ones that I hadn't read, but to read them in order, having read many of the major works. My cat is still here, if you were wondering. Let's get into it. My Virginia Woolf shelf is here. That's why I'm slightly off to the side here. I feel like I don't have a great filming background, and I definitely don't have a great way to set it up, but I think it's working. My Virginia Woolf collection, I purchased most of these for that original course, and then the ones we didn't read, I purchased immediately after. There were a couple that I didn't have that I got specifically for the book club, and then I have some special editions which I will get into as well. So you're brand new to Virginia Woolf. Where do you start? I'm not trying to scare you. Spoiler alert, there's only 2 books here. It's just multiple editions of the same book. I'm going to recommend you start with Mrs. Dalloway or To the Lighthouse, and or both, of course. I, of course, started with Mrs. Dalloway. It really allowed me to fall in love with Virginia Woolf. It allowed me to experience her writing. It allowed me to prepare to dive further into her writing, get familiar with her style, and I do think this is a really good place to start. Some of my friends started with To the Lighthouse. In other college courses that I took, To the Lighthouse was also featured. This is sort of the second novel. People almost always start with either Mrs. Dalloway or To the Lighthouse, and I would recommend starting with either. How do you decide which one of these 2 to start with? I'll give you a little bit of a synopsis. Mrs. Dalloway follows Clarissa Dalloway over the course of one day in London as she prepares to throw this party. Of course, the novel is about so much more than a party, and that's the beauty of it and the point of it. I recently read The Annotated Mrs. Dalloway by Merv Emre. I thought this was beautifully done. If you are nervous about starting with Virginia Woolf, if you don't feel comfortable or confident diving in by yourself, I highly recommend The Annotated Mrs. Dalloway. I also recommend it if you love Virginia Woolf and you've read Mrs. Dalloway a couple or maybe several times. I bring this up now because yes, on its face, Mrs. Dalloway is a book about a woman throwing a party. But in The Annotated Mrs. Dalloway, Emre says, this is a book about life and death. And she cites 2 Woolf's journals and her diary entries. She is seeking to bring out life and death in this novel, and part of what the annotations follow are scenes and citing and sources to prove that theory. Of course, that was something that I was most interested while reading this, but there is also really great historical and biographical background knowledge that will give you a really good idea and a really good guideline while considering this work. The other editions I have of Mrs. Dalloway, this is your standard hardcore brace edition. This is the one recommended for my class. This is a really nice edition. It will give you the text without textual discrepancies. The Annotated Mrs. Dalloway will go into some of the differences between a publication in the UK and England and some choices that editors have made. Then, I actually don't super love this edition, but I did my main annotation in it. This is a bind up, and it includes Mrs. Dalloway and The Hours by Michael Cunningham. If you didn't know, Virginia Woolf originally planned on titling Mrs. Dalloway The Hours. She did not end up sticking with that title. However, Michael Cunningham rewrote Mrs. Dalloway in his novel, The Hours, and it is beautiful and very well done. As you can see, I haven't read it from this edition quite yet, and I've actually only read it once, but I love it, and the movie is very well done as well. The other edition that I have of Mrs. Dalloway is this Penguin Clothbound Classic edition. I also thought the notes in this one was very good. These 2 both have notes. The other 2 do not, so keep that in mind if that's something you're interested in when you start. To the Lighthouse is semi-autobiographical. It follows the family of the Ramsays while they are at their summer vacation home. This is based on Woolf's own vacation home in St. Ives, the UK. Mrs. Dalloway is really an exploration of life and death. This work is more of an exploration of familial relationships. It also discusses art, and it is a grappling with the end of the Victorian age, Victorian literature and that period, and a push into modernism, which is Virginia Woolf's category that she's categorized in. Next up, I am going to recommend one of her essays. This is also a great place to start if you want a little bit of a shorter piece. It is A Room of One's Own. This is an essay that was delivered as a speech, a lecture at a college. It is about women in fiction, women in writing, and Virginia Woolf's famous argument is that women are not in these spaces because they haven't been given a place to create and to think. They have not been given a room of one's own. This is beautiful. I reread it for the first time with my book club as I was starting my career in a male-dominated profession, and I feel like it gave me a new perspective and it was just very interesting. I highly recommend this little piece. Next, I'm going to recommend that you go to the beginning with The Voyage Out and Jacob's Room. These are two of her earlier works. I do think that they are worth visiting. The first time that I read The Voyage Out, did not like it. This, I would say, is her only novel with a plot. She felt that she had to have a plot, sort of forced it into this plot. I recommend these as sort of the second category after Mrs. Dalloway and To the Lighthouse, because I think you need to build up your Woolf repertoire a little bit before you can fully appreciate some of her earlier works and see how these ideas have developed, where they are coming from. So on my second reread, I had read everything that I read in my Woolf class, and we actually started here. But as you can see, coming into this after a course, after reading some of her other works, it really gave me a different perspective on this piece. And I saw so much in here that I really loved. And I think if you focus on the characters outside the plot, I think the plot is irrelevant, but if you focus on our characters, and in Mrs. Dalloway you see this, in some of her shorter pieces you see this, character is really where Woolf shines, and that is what she's focusing on, what she is developing in her modernist pieces and with her work. Jacob's Room is more experimental than The Voyage Out, and it's perhaps less cohesive than some of her other works. I highly recommend this one if you're in college, just entering college, or just coming out of college. This one really spoke to me while I was in my class. It might have been my second favorite after Mrs. Dalloway at that time. Since I've grown, had some new experiences, and in reading this again, it didn't speak to me as much. I still found it an interesting piece in the context of Woolf's larger works, but it no longer spoke to me on that personal level. I forgot to give a brief synopsis about either of these, so very briefly, this one follows Rachel Vinrance as she travels to, I guess that the plot's not that important. She travels to an African country, perhaps. But she travels to a less developed country, and this one really has commentary on empire, especially in the British context. If you've read The Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad, I would say it's similar to that, maybe more juvenile, but the themes and explorations are similar to that, and you might like this one. Then I'm going to argue Jacob's Room, at the heart of it, is a love story. It's about two young men at Oxford and their sort of love, underlying love, undercurrent love for each other. Jacob is also very much rooted and based in one of Virginia Woolf's own brothers, Toby, who died quite young, and looking at it in that light is an extra heartbreaking piece added. Maybe you're looking for something not so serious. Virginia Woolf, she had a lot of fun too. The girl can have fun. So my next categories, and these do have a hint of devastation and they aren't completely light reads, but I think that these novels are her most fun works. So first up we have Orlando. I did not read this one in my Woolf class. So reading it with my book club was the first time that I've read it. I've only read it once. I acquired this beautiful penguin cloth bound classic edition of Orlando when I was in Ireland. Oh, here's the bookmark. Books upstairs. So I would love to read it in this, and I'm pretty sure this one has footnotes. I liked this one more than I thought that I would. This is a lot of people's favorite Woolf, understandably. It's very good. This follows the main character, the person, Orlando, and he starts this novel as a she. She's a woman, and she transitions and changes into a man. At the time, this is so groundbreaking, so different, so fresh. Virginia Woolf and Leonard Woolf had their own printing press, the Hogarth Press, and that is partly why she had so much freedom and so much liberty to publish her works. That's the main premise, but it is about so much more than that. It spans decades, it spans centuries, and you are following Orlando on this romp from maybe the 1500s up to the present modern time in England. There's also a surprising amount about nature in this, which I found really interesting, and those parts I really liked. I would like to revisit this. I picked this edition up used. I just kind of like it with the orange. So that's that one. Next up we have Flush. This is a biography about a dog. This is a biography about Elizabeth Barrett Browning's dog, Flush. It's very well done. I didn't expect this one to touch me as much as it did, and this one's just fun. It's a great piece to check out. And finally, I did not know, also we did not read Flush in our Woolf class, but we did discuss it a little bit. I didn't know this existed. This is a play. It's called Freshwater. This is not just by Virginia Woolf, or it wasn't just for herself. Virginia Woolf was part of the Bloomsbury group, and her friends would write little plays and like put them on, which I just think is so cute and so fun. For our book club, we hosted a time we all got together and we assigned each other parts and we read this, and it's one of my favorite memories ever, and it was so much fun. So if you're looking for something fun to do with your bookish friends, pick up a copy of Freshwater, give each other parts, read them, laugh, delight. It's a fun time. I don't remember what this is actually about. I just remember the fun and the frivolity of like putting it on. So this book, this one is her masterpiece. This is what all the other work was building towards, and you may not have heard of it. It's The Waves. Mrs. Dalloway is my favorite Woolf because of the emotional connections I have to it, but The Waves is really her showstopper and her most powerful work, in my opinion. This novel follows 6 children from when they are young into as they grow up, and as they grow older, each of them has different interests, and through them Woolf can explore different things. It's the most realistic. You get to follow these characters and it doesn't even feel like you're reading in a way. Mrs. Dalloway is so close to reality. It is so close to real life, and even more that modern experience of real life. You're walking down the street and you run into someone. Strangers are thinking things. Something reminds you of something else. In my Woolf class, my professor described this as this novel is almost like music, where you're trying to play all the right notes at the same time to hit the chord. In this one, she hits the chord. It's beautiful, it's magnificent, and this would be one, if you're not going to read every single Woolf, I would recommend to read this one. Are you tired? I'm not, because I'm talking about Virginia Woolf. But next up, I'm going to recommend her last novel, Between the Acts. This was not published before she died. I actually don't have too much to say about this one other than it's set in between World War I and II, and it follows a play, a performance, but it is more about analyzing, watching, interpreting the character's reaction to that performance. I'm going to briefly mention her other two major novels, major works. If you're not looking to become a Woolf scholar, I don't think I'd necessarily recommend these ones, but they are part of her collection. The first one up is The Years. I'd recommend this more than the other one. I'm going to mention I enjoyed reading this. I saw elements of her other work in this. I would like to read it again someday and see if I get anything else out of it. It follows familial relationships through different years in time, and you see the younger generations grow up and become the older generations. I think this is one I'd like to revisit when I get older, but that's The Years. I hated this book. There is one Virginia Woolf that I do not like. It is Night and Day. I feel a little bit better because Woolf wrote this novel and said herself that she also hated it. This book did not want to be read. It literally fell apart as I was reading. It just gave up because it so much did not want to be read. Maybe Woolf's most conventional novel. It follows Catherine. She gets married. It's kind of a romance. It's so boring. It doesn't read like Woolf. Honestly, I think you can safely skip this one unless, like me, you are a completionist. I don't see myself ever returning to this one later in life. And this copy, I would have to get a new copy because this one is now unreadable. At the beginning, I mentioned that Woolf has quite the body of nonfiction as well. So as part of our book club, we read The Common Reader. Woolf was writing this at the same time as Mrs. Dalloway in the annotated Mrs. Dalloway. It was really interesting to see Emery's thoughts in comparison with journal and letters and own writings and how these two were being written at the same time. I really enjoyed this book and this little collection. You can definitely dip in and out of it, but it is Woolf's reading and comments, analysis on various other big pieces of literature, some that are still very famous and very much read today, some maybe that aren't as famous anymore, but were at the time. Then the other one I'm going to briefly mention is Three Guineas. This one is similar to Room of One's Own, but it's from the monetary perspective of women and writing. Then Woolf's shorter works. I did read some of this in my class. In our book club, we didn't really touch on this too much. We kind of read some here and there, but Woolf has such a body of shorter works. I will admit I'm not too interested in short pieces. 3 that I would recommend if you're getting into Woolf and you're interested. One is The Moth. I'm not going to say anything else. The title makes it apparent and you have to read it for yourself. The second one I'm going to recommend is On Illness. This one is beautifully done. It is a commentary on illness, mental, physical, and how pain cannot be described. It just must be felt. If you are interested in suffering, if you're interested in illness in any way, check this piece out. The last one I'm going to recommend is Mrs. Bennet and Mr. Brown. This one is a commentary on fiction and on writing, and similarly, Woolf has other shorter pieces that are commentaries on writing and exploring character. The mini penguin cloth-bound collection of Street Haunting. I really enjoy all of the little ones in here. Of course, the ones that I mentioned aren't in this collection. I don't know if there's a good bind up of all of her shorter pieces. If you do know of one, please let me know and I'll get my hands on a copy. Finally, Virginia Woolf wrote an uncompleted memoir. It is called Moments of Being. If you're interested in her as a person, her life, please check this one out. I really loved this. I haven't revisited it since, but I would really like to do that. I might not have read this in its entirety. I don't think all of it was assigned for my class. And then also for my class, and I think this is the most recommended comprehensive Woolf biography. It's Hermione Lee's biography on Virginia Woolf. I have read this one cover to cover. Not all of it was assigned, but I did go through and read this. This goes into her life. It follows all of her lives. It is so comprehensive, and it really gave me an insight and opening into her work. So I read this whole thing after I graduated college, but before I decided to do this Woolf reread, so I had a lot of this knowledge going in, which was very nice. I would like to check out further. This is an area I haven't gone into hardly at all. Virginia Woolf's diaries. They have volumes and bind-ups of the entirety of her collection. I can't remember how many volumes there are off the top of my head. I just have the selected ones of a writer's diary. If you're interested but don't want to commit to however many volumes, you could check this one out. It was recommended for our class, and we read parts in here. Apparently, we read whatever is in between these two pages and just use that to analyze, talk about. I've been wanting to make this video for so long, so thank you for watching. Thank you for sticking with me until the end. If you made it all the way to the end, leave a emoji, the little flower bouquet for Mrs. Dalloway in the comments. If you've read Virginia Woolf, please let me know which is your favorite Woolf, and if you've been dying to try her but maybe are a little bit scared, let me know which one of the books you thought was most exciting, which one you're most interested in checking out. Until then, I'm excited to see you in another video. Bye.